Hello, fellow rock lovers. Look at this big chunk of, I'm told this is opalized petrified wood. Look at this. This thing is so big I can barely get it in the frame of this camera on my little stand here. For this video, I'm going to take this big chunk of, again, some sort of petrified wood, and I'm going to make it into a sphere about this size. Let's do this for comparison. Let me move that over. This is about the size of a sphere I can make with my little jig I've got with the size cups that I use on my sphere making machine. Now, can I get this big old piece of wood to look like this? I don't know. Actually, I think I can. It's going to take quite a while. I'm going to have to get this on my big slab saw and make a bunch of cuts on it to get the what we call the preform, which is a sort of spherical looking piece. And then I'll take that piece, grind off the corners on the cabbing machine, and then finally get it on the sphere making machine. But it's all going to start with this giant piece of petrified wood. So let's get started. Let me go ahead and move this thing into the shop, get it set up on the saw, and start that long and tedious process. Okay, first thing is to get the rock mounted into the vise. As you can see, it's overhanging quite a bit, which makes it a little precarious. But don't worry, I've got it in there locked nice and tightly where it won't come out. And it's important to have it hanging out that far because I need to make this giant slab to start with. Now, I use this caliper here to show that's about the width of the sphere I can make. I want to make sure I'm going to have a big enough slab to make the sphere that I want. So I have to sort of check to make sure that I am capturing enough stone. And it looks good. Let's go ahead and make this first cut. Okay, got that first cut off, and it looks pretty interesting on the inside. I think this might make a good looking sphere. Now I had to move the carriage over quite a bit to make this giant slab, my sphere slab. There it is. There's the sphere slab. Say that 10 times quick. Okay, now that I have that, I can put it in this new jig that allows me to rotate into these discrete positions and lock in place. That's very important. We're going to make a bunch of cuts here shortly. It's also very important at this point not to move the carriage anymore. Otherwise, we get some oblong shape. So we've got it locked in, ready for this first cut. The carriage is not going to move. And let's begin. Let's make our first cut. All right, let's make another cut. And again, and again, and again, and again, and again, and again. Whew. Another cut, another cut, and another cut. Okay, so after all that cutting, this is what we have. Now this interesting shape here is going to go back in this little jig, only this way in this orientation, so we can start making some more cuts. And here we go. Let's make our first cut. Okay, let's make another cut, and another cut, another cut, and again, and again, and again, and again. Okay, now it's starting to look like a sphere. What do you think? You can kind of see a sphere now. Well, we're not done yet though. We need to keep cutting. Let's get it back in the jig and start making some more cuts. And another cut, and another cut. Let's cut it again, and again, and again, and cut it again. Another cut, another cut, another cut. Will this ever end? Another cut, and finally, after a laborious 34 cuts on the slab saw, this is what we have. This is our preform. So you can see it sort of looks like a sphere. Remember, this is the one we're shooting for. I should say the shape. So we're getting closer. It's still got a ways to go, but we'll get there. The next step will be to take this to the cabbing machine and get it on the coarse 80 grit wheel and just smooth out all these little edges here. By doing that, it will make the next step after that go much easier. That's when I put it on the sphere making machine, which has the 3 different grinding cups that hopefully will turn this thing into a nice sphere. So anyway, looking at this now, it's a good looking rock. I think it's going to turn out nice when it's finished, assuming it takes a great polish. I sure hope it does after all the work that goes into making this thing. So the next step will be to get this thing on the cab machine and get it smoothed out. I'll show you what it looks like before we started on the sphere making machine. And by the way, this took a lot of cutting, which means we had a lot of excess rock. There's some big chunks here, some little chunks. If this takes a nice polish, and which I hopefully it will, I'll be able to take these pieces and do something with them. I can probably tumble most of it, but there's still some larger pieces in here, the initial 2 end cuts, that can be re-slabbed or who knows what. So all that will not go to waste, I promise you. That's good petrified wood right there. And that's what you gotta do to make something like this. I usually spend about 5 minutes grinding down these edges before I'm happy with the final shape of this preform. The preform is finally finished. Whew, that took a lot of time and effort. But as you can see, we've almost got a sphere, at least as close to a sphere as I can make without using the sphere making machine. What do you think? You think this is going to turn out to be a nice looking sphere? I do. Look at some of the pattern in here. Isn't that beautiful? If this takes a good shine, this will be beautiful. Now, as you can see, there are some voids in here, just natural little areas in the rock that might prevent this from being a perfectly smooth sphere, but that's okay. It's all natural. What are you going to do? So the next step will be to get this thing on the actual machine itself, and I will show you those steps as well. So let's not forget, this is the shape we're going for. So we're close. We were almost there. And you can see we can grind down quite a bit before our cups run out of their effective range, which means we might be able to burn through some of these imperfections on here and end up ultimately with a smooth rock. I don't know how deep that is right there, but maybe with enough grinding, we can make this thing nice and smooth. Although this area here looks a little suspect, so we'll see. Next step, sphere making machine. I like to begin by using these iron cups. I got these from Covington. Now with these cups, you actually have to add the silicon carbide grit, and I'm using the 6090, the exact same grit I use to tumble my stones in the course stage. But as you can see, I put a little bit on, it sort of gets embedded in the iron cups and it starts to grind this thing down. You see the slurry develop, again, much like tumbling a rock. And I just continue doing this. You see it's getting smoother. Here's what it looks like after I've put some water on it. Now those flat spots all look like little pepperonis or, well, I don't know, perhaps some monster from an old Star Trek episode. But this will not be finished until all those circles are gone. That's how I know it's finished and it's a perfect sphere. So here you can see a lot of them are gone, but we still have ways to go. When it gets close, I go ahead and switch to the Highland Park diamond encrusted cups. These are the 80 grit, and they then do the kind of the final smoothing in the course stage. Here I've wetted it. You can see there's just a few of those circles left. And again, we're not finished until those are all gone. Those are those flat spots that have become those circles. It's getting close now. You can just barely see any. After several hours of grinding this thing in the sphere making machine, you can see we finally have a sphere. Of course, there are some flaws in it. As you can see, we've got some cracks, some fractures, some of these pits. Yeah, I didn't want to continue grinding it down, making it smaller and smaller to try to get rid of those. Well, for one thing, I don't know if there are more lurking beneath. And for another thing, I don't want this getting too small. So I'm going to live with those. Well, it took several hours to get this to this shape. But now the next few steps should go a little faster. I'm going to get it back on the sphere making machine and start with the finer and finer grit cups. I will move on to the 220 grit, and then I'll go to 400 grit, 1200, and finally 4000 grit. And at that point, hopefully, we'll have a great polish. This is, again, the size we're going for. I think we're pretty close. It's a little bit bigger. That's fine. Hopefully, it'll have a better shine when we're done. I was never very happy with the way this one shined. So let's cross our fingers and hope that once the polishing is finished, this thing is beautiful and shiny. The next cup grit we use is the 220 grit, and yes, they're all the same, even though there's a slight discoloration. Here's how it looks. No shine yet, but it's nice and smooth to the touch. It's looking good. We put it back on the machine, this time with 400 grit cups. Let this run for a while. You can see a little slurry on there. Oh, just FYI, between these runs, I usually put it in the ultrasonic cleaner. Here you can actually see some of the debris coming up from a pit right there. Okay, here's how it looks after the 400. There's a little bit of a shine. You can just make out a hint of a reflection there. That's a good sign. Now, let's go on to the 1200 grit cups. This is where the shine should begin, after 1200 grit, just like on a cabbing machine. And there you go. Looking good. You see how the lights dance on the surface as we go across it, looking for a nice smooth reflection. But what happened there? Check that out. I think that it wasn't a random motion and that spot must have been missed, so I'm going to touch that up on the cabbing machine. Anyway, get them back on the 4,000 grit cups this time. This is the final polish, 4,000 grit. What's it going to look like after this? There you go. That's the final polish. Looking good. Nice reflection all the way around. Very good. Let's take this inside and we'll take a closer look. After several days in the shop, our sphere is finally finished. Check it out. What do you think? I like it. I think it turned out pretty good, all things considered. I couldn't do anything about these vugs, these pockets, these natural little voids, and unfortunately these fractures as well. In spite of all that though, I still think it turned out great. Look at the pattern in that. Isn't that beautiful? And for the most part, it took a great shine. Yeah, there was a couple of areas I had to tweak up a little bit with the cabbing machine, but otherwise, I think it's stunning. Look at that. You can see both lights reflecting, the one from the front and the one I have in the back. And of course the big diffuse light above. So remember, this is the one we were comparing it to. It's pretty close. As you can see, this has a much better shine than this one. I'm not sure what happened with this. Well, anyway. So there you go. That's how you make a sphere from a big chunk of opalized petrified wood. Now who's gonna get this rock? Well, this is gonna be sent to my favorite Facebook seller. Her name is Kimberly Roll. I believe her site is Roll's Rock and Gift Shop. Anyway, check her out on Facebook. She's supplied me with many great rocks over the years, and I appreciate her. I promised her I'd make this for her, and that's what I've done. I'll be reaching out to her to find out where to ship it. So thank you so much for watching this little video. I sure hope you enjoyed it. Please be sure and check my other videos for a lot more like this. Thanks again.